start off with a really quick question right off the bat to get this thing started. But since this session is all about getting online when you're not online, I know that for some people out there that this can seem really daunting and maybe a major challenge, but I want to ask Josh and Jared and Pastor Ryan, if he's here, to see what would you guys say to that question?
I would say it's probably easier than you think. This was our first weekend ever having done anything live like that. And so we had a great team. We were really planning and preparing for when this happened, not if. And so we had some things already rolling. And it can seem super daunting, like if you don't have a big budget or you maybe watch the live streams of other churches and you're like, gosh, we can never do that. I have like, a mom with an iPhone is my social media team. Like that's all we have. We have the budget for. And it can seem like that would disqualify you. And then we often disqualify ourselves because we feel like we can never do that. But I'll just tell you, like at our church, we have 2 paid staff, 2.5. Our worship person is part-time. So we have 2.5 staff. Our social media team is like totally volunteer. We don't have this huge production budget. We don't have all these cameras. We have 1 camera and we got a microphone in a room and we sat some people in the room. And what our team came up with and executed was incredible. And none of them are paid and we don't normally live stream. We just had people who were committed to resourcing the people in our church and figuring it out. And so for those of you that it might seem like a daunting task, I totally understand. But it's far easier than you think. And you don't need to have it. I would hate for you to disqualify yourself because you don't have a gigantic budget and these roaming cameras on Zoom cranes and all that stuff is awesome. But just because you don't have that doesn't mean that you can't get fantastic, timely, incarnational content to your people to serve them well in their living rooms.
That's great. What about you, Jared?
Yeah, so I saw even the second question that kind of pertains to that. It says they're concerned about Church Online, like for the free applications, but if you go to actually Church Online platform, which is Life Church's free application, they've got the bandwidth to pretty much handle everyone, and it's free. You can go online today with whatever gear you have, whatever you have. If it is just an iPhone, you can do that. The other option is through Yellowbox. They've offered their services for basically $99. They will set you up with a full page for streaming, and that gives you your regular environment, but it also gives you a children's page so you can have children's engagement, and then it also archives everything. So it's a little more than just the platform. The platform is just going to allow you to go online, but once you're done, it's gone. The cool thing with Yellowbox is they're offering it basically at just their cost to try to get it out there for you guys, and it'll go straight on your website. They've got developers putting it together as we speak right now, so that's a cool resource for you. And they can also help you walk you through. I'm not like super tech savvy to know, okay, you got to encode this and decode this. That's the things other people handle normally. And so, but guys who walk the entire process to know exactly what to do.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common misconception with a lot of people that they think that it's going to take this outrageous budget. It's going to take all this crazy stuff. And realistically, we do it every day with our iPhones. We're constantly engaging with people. I mean, if you look at what we're doing right now, there are literally just yesterday, hundreds of lead pastors connected digitally, all getting information at the same time. And so it is 100% doable. It is 100% accomplishable for your church, any size matter. And it's really helpful in reaching people, especially in light of what we're facing. And so really excited that we get to be able to partner with people like Yellow Box who are helping churches make it work. But Facebook, YouTube, Church Online platform. And like Jared said, the Church Online platform it's actually my favorite of the platforms in the sense of the engagement that you can have with people. And it is not a challenge to set up. They are more than willing to help, and there's tons of resources out there. They have a great community when you're a part of it. There's a help function, and there's a great community of people who are there to answer questions. So other people who are doing exactly what we're doing are there answering questions all hours of the night, trying to help make sure that the church stays moving forward and reaching people. And so I think in general, I think we feel a lot of times that it's scarier than it actually is. And I want to help us today eliminate some of those fears. And so some questions coming more. How do you effectively and consistently communicate to your church what you're doing when only working online, specifically social media? You have a schedule. What does that schedule look like, et cetera? Josh, what
Yeah, I really like that we get to weigh in on this call with all these questions because there's churches of all different sizes on here. I would say to effectively and consistently communicate, I think that second word is super important. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I just ran upstairs. Whew. I think that second word is really important. Consistently. I think, again, we build things up really big in our minds. Like we have to have the perfect content. Like, what are we going to say? What if we get it wrong? I think our people have far more grace with us than we give them credit for. They're not looking for solutions so much as they just want to stay connected. Like, especially in like everybody's socially distancing and we're gap of elbows right now, or feet or whatever we're doing, and staying 6 feet apart. I think to just have some sort of communication in front of them consistently is far more important than we realize. Like just even sending out something on Facebook like, hey, church, here's what we're praying over you. Here's the verse. Like, bam, go for it. You're done. They saw it from you. You're not detached. Something Pastor Kevin said yesterday on the lead pack call, it was great. He said we're ramping up our voice in this season. We're not shrinking back. And so I think that consistency, there's a question coming later talking about connect groups and stuff, but even we're leveraging our connect group hosts, whatever platforms they normally communicate with their people. Some of them have Facebook groups, some of them have group texts, whatever it is, that our connect group hosts are in contact once a day with. They're just sending something out. How's everybody doing? How you feeling? Who needs toilet paper? Like, are you guys good? And so it doesn't necessarily have to come from even, I don't think, your public church account. I'm not saying be silent there, be consistent there, but even just having a culture of consistent communication from your team leaders, connect groups, whatever your structure is, I think will really be comforting for people. So that's how we're leveraging all that stuff in this moment.
Yeah, we got Pastor Ryan with us too now, I believe. Pastor Ryan, the question is, how do you effectively, consistently communicate to your church what you're doing when only working online? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny you guys say that. I apologize. I was a little late. I just got out of a meeting with our lead pastor around this very conversation. And we're right now talking with our location pastors how we go about continuing to pastor people. And I think, what Josh said, just to kind of reinforce or confirm what you had just stated, the approach and the play that we're continuing to run, and it's probably seems obvious to all of us, but I think it's worth stating again because everything is shifting so dramatically day by day, week by week, is we're really just going back through and looking. We all have our key leaders at our churches and our locations that we're familiar with, that we interact with. And what we're trying to do in this time with the team that we have, in the cases where we have full-time staff members, or if you're operating with, high-level key volunteers, what some of us would call volunteer staff, we're really working to rebuild out the list of everyone who's engaging in our church, and kind of the two filters that it's pretty easy for all of us to track is if they're serving on a team regularly. We pretty much know their name. We have a record of them. If they contribute pretty regularly, we know their name and we have a consistency and a pattern. And then the other one that's pretty obvious for a lot of us is parents that check their kids in. So that list we're looking at right now at each location. In the Champion Center context, we have different physical locations. So I know many of you guys have other locations. Some of you are in a scenario where you're in one location. Whatever the context is, it works the same for all of us in that who is that active group. And then right now, we're looking to find ways to personally reach out, connect, just like Josh said. How are you doing? How can we be praying for you? And then the other thing that we're doing to engage the online segment is we're actually now moving toward inviting everyone to let us know who's at their watch party, whether their watch party is their own unique family or if their watch party is actually a group of 7 to 10 or whatever. You know, again, with the new language, I don't know if you guys saw some of the language that came out yesterday from a lot of our public health officials out of the White House. You know, it's basically shrunk that group down again. So I'm not here to perpetuate what all that means. We're all trying to interpret that and make sense of it, right? But the point is for us, we are just doing everything we can to really go above and beyond to personally connect and so that people feel connected with. And we're willing to be, you know, just to get out there and communicate versus having it all perfect and pretty and making sure every pathway. We just really want to get in front of people. Hey, we know you're there. We love you. We're connecting with you. And then again, like what we're doing on the other end is just taking time to have them talk back to us and, hey, who's joining your watch party? Or is it the 4 of you, your family, or you get together with the Joneses or the, you know, the so-and-sos? Because we want to know and we want to help and connect with you.
Exactly. And, you know, that leads to another really great question is that due to current circumstances, who is your audience? How broad should we design our content? I think the truth is Pastor Kevin's been saying this lately, and there's a statistic that says 7 out of 10 people have their phones with them within 5 feet of them at all times. And so I think the truth is our audience is the world. It's not the context of, we're not tied to zip codes. We're not tied to specific locations. We're tied to, we're literally a broad, open, wide open audience. And so I guess the question I would ask then is how broad should we be going is the question that's being asked when we come to the designing. How about you, Jared?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, keep your content what it's going to be for your people, because obviously you're designing content to fit your congregation, but it's going to fit everyone. So I wouldn't get so bogged down to try to talk about necessarily worldviews. Just talk about what you feel is the need in your community right then, and you're going to automatically affect so many people. We just got out of a meeting talking the same thing about, you know, okay, what series do we do now, or what topics should we talk about? And we came out of there saying, you know what, let's just focus on felt needs right now. People are lonely. People are scared, fear, you know, all that kind of stuff. If you're going to talk like that, you're going to talk worldwide anyway, because this is the thing. People are tuning into church now more than ever before. They're looking to the church to say, okay, what's going to happen? And so we have really been trying to focus on language that is always just encouraging, always moving forward, you know, instead of focusing on, you know, what are we going to do, you know, as a community. We haven't actually talked about, you know, like when we get back in church, we're just acting as if this is normal. And that way people don't feel like they already don't feel normal because they can't go out, they can't do the things that they normally do. So we're just choosing not even to focus on how weird things are right now and focus on like, this is just our opportunity to reach even more people. And we are encouraging in our watch parties, you know, invite more than just your church friends, obviously. In fact, we did it this past Sunday, and my wife and I just, you know, posted something up, invited a few people, and we had like 20 of our friends that don't even live in cities that are around us, and they were watching, and then they started texting us directly, hey, that was very encouraging. You know, I've never been in church services like that before. So look at it as more of an opportunity right now rather than, oh my gosh, what do I need to make this content, you know, designed for that sort of avenue.
Yeah, I think it goes. Oh, sorry, Con.
We took the approach very similar to what Jared is saying, that like our framework was we're creating this for our church, but also aware that the whole world is looking through the window into what you're doing. So like we prepared the stuff for our church, but we were aware that there's lots of people looking in. And then you got many of you who did this, you probably got stories like this weekend, but we got tons of stories that all were something around, hey, we texted our cousin in Chicago who doesn't go to church, like, hey, jump on and watch this. And they did. And they told us, oh my gosh, it was so encouraging. Thank you. And so we really treated it as like they're looking through the window into what we're doing. It's one of the reasons, I know there's lots of philosophies about this, but it's one of the reasons we didn't record in our auditorium. And this is just a philosophical thing. There's lots of people who do that and go for it. But we didn't want people to feel like they weren't at church. So we did it in a totally different room in our building and try to really like serve the living room was our strategy. It created that window for lots of people to be watching in and looking and seeing, and it felt comfortable to them was the stories that we got. And so we're like Jared said, we're creating it for our church, but we are very aware that there's lots of people, way more people than normal, looking through the window into what we're doing.
For sure. And I think that goes back to an earlier question about what do we do about the platforms that we're on? You know, what do we do if we only have Facebook? What do we do if we only have Church Online? I think you leverage that content that you're talking about and you use that content on whatever avenues you have. It doesn't change whether or not we're communicating to both sides, where we're communicating to those that attend our church, as Jared and Josh had mentioned, but we're also communicating to those that are outside of our church. And so there's situations with canceling events type thing where we gotta let people know that there's also hope on the other side of storm that is raging and people, and being that hope to those people. What do you do when you only have those platforms? I think the answer to that question is you just leverage what you have. So let's go back to the online streaming side for a minute. There's a lot of questions coming in about how do we engage kids specifically. I know that a lot of churches, it was new to a lot of churches this weekend, is how to engage kids. We're doing a special meetup about that later this week. For one thing, what we did is we just provided the resources that we had already used, that we were already planning on using, and just created links that parents could go get those and do those on their own. Now that can evolve into something even bigger and better in the future. But I guess the question I would pose, just because it's asked here, is what other things have you guys done, Josh, Jared, specifically to speak to that?
Yeah, so we kind of pulled it last minute. We were, so scrambling just to get our main service online. Then we said, oh, well, what are the kids going to do? And so thank God we have an awesome children's director here. She was a teacher for many years and used like Google Classroom and all that kind of stuff. So we were able to film just like some quick bumper, a start bumper, a prayer bumper, and a few other things. And then we just pulled in, they have video curriculum anyway. That's how we run our children's ministry. So she did like an intro bumper. Then we went straight into like lyric video type children's worship. We have live worship, but they don't play instruments. They just kind of sing on stage and have like the dancing background or whatever. And so we just played those videos. And the cool thing is my kids were at home. We put it on in the movie room and they jumped up and did all the dance moves like they would do at church anyway. And so we did a couple of worship songs, transition. She did another transition video and she recorded it with her iPhone. It wasn't like some like professional setup. She just recorded with her iPhone. All right, we're going to start the message now. Blah, kind of gave some instructions. Boom. And then we threw it into our video curriculum, and then they came back and she did like a prayer of salvation. And all we did was link on our app. We just put like Skybreak Kids. They clicked on it, and it was just a separate link to their own. We just created their own Facebook page. Instead of, for us, it's, you know, Skybreak Church, but for the kids, it was just Skybreak Kids at Facebook. And then boom, they clicked on that, and they had their own environment. It required about an hour's worth of work, but the impact, we have people sending in. And that's the other thing for engagement. Have people send in like videos or pictures of them like sitting and having host parties with each other, or you know, their kids interacting. Because then it inspired, by the time we got to our second service and we ran it again, there was already a bunch of posts like, man, children's ministry this morning was awesome. Take a look at our kids, this and that. And so then a lot of people got on and did the kids' environment. So if you need help with that, obviously I'm available. There's several people that can help you kind of get that set up. But it was as easy as we literally created a Facebook page in like 10 minutes and just posted it. So that's kind of how we did it.
What about you, Josh?
I love that. I'm just going to steal everything Jared just said. We took all of our normal curriculum, like our team writes the curriculum. And so what they did to pivot is they put together a doc, because again, we were trying to go, like, I love how Jared said it. We were trying to get our weekend on, and we were like, oh my gosh, kids sounds terrible, but like it's how it went. And so our team put the doc together, like it was a 1-page, super easy thing that for this last weekend, what we did was just resource the parents to be there with their kids. One of the values that for our children's ministry is that we want to elevate the parents as the spiritual leaders. And so we're always trying to resource them anyway. And so it fit into our flow. And so it was a 1-page doc that gave them the scripture. It was almost like a script, like they could literally walk through it, the object lesson. I got to read it. It was cool. It was about spending time with Jesus. Like the main point was being with Jesus is valuable. And so they were like, parents, say this, ask your kids this question, let them respond. Here's the object lesson, pull out your phone and plug it in. And it was really cool. And so that was what we leveraged based on the resources we have. Again, we're a fairly small church with a really lean staff. And so we did what we could with the resources we had and the time we had, which again, I'll probably say it multiple times on this call. I'm glad that we have different people on this so that we can see how different people with different size resources and staffs and budgets are going about it. Our kids team right now is working on doing some of that video stuff that Jared was talking about, because we now have a week instead of 2 days. But they're probably going to use like their iPhone, just like Jared said. And so I would hate for you to disqualify yourself because you think you don't have the right gear and the right equipment. Like getting your heart and your vision and the teachers that they're used to, or the flow that they're used to create consistency when stuff is chaotic, is super pastoral and will help bring comfort and calm. And they'll love to see, Miss Tina or whoever she is on there reading the scripture.
Yeah, I think that's great. You're empowering parents. That's another great opportunity to really do that. Pastor Ryan, I'm going to kick this one to you, but on the same vein, one of the questions is, how should we go about getting together with our junior highs and our high school students? And I know here at Champion Center, we had a really big event that was supposed to be happening, tonight and tomorrow night on both sides of the mountains for us, called our One Big Night. And we're launching something brand new. It's test. It's like we've never done it or seen it done, but we're trying it. And so, Pastor Ryan, why don't you speak to that a little?
Yeah. Like I think, like everyone, we're a couple of ways. I don't know if you guys spoke to this because I got here a touch late. So if anything is redundant, I apologize. But we're really leveraging, just like we're on this call, we're leveraging Zoom. We're playing with every technology. Instagram is like a way that we're capturing. So most of our younger students are on Instagram. So we'll start with just a live broadcast from our leaders. And then from there, that's leveraging into either Zoom calls, or for the kids that have it, You can do FaceTime Connect. So there's actually a few different technologies that we're playing around with. But I don't know if I'm going to continue to answer because we're still unpacking it. But yeah, we had to cancel like a lot of conferences. We're stopping the original event and we're repurposing it through digital connections. And I just think staying very fluid and inviting young people into it, like some of our youth leaders are helping create how they can connect that makes sense, because we've noticed with specifically in youth ministry, even from high schoolers to junior hires to young adults, sometimes the platforms they connect on are different, and that's okay. Like lean into what platforms that you find your students naturally connecting on. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. Also with that, they're also pretty fluid. So if we introduce something like, hey, we're all going to do a Zoom webinar, or, they're pretty cool. But I think what we're doing is we're leveraging the platforms they're on. And then if we want to go to a different location, we're just using like Instagram, for example, and then saying, hey, everyone, we're going to meet up here. And then we're finding ways to take the bigger gathering and then break it into small groups. Because the way we do youth ministry every week is it's more, we'll have teaching up front for 15 minutes, and it's either a small group video or it's one of our, volunteer pastors or staff pastors teaching to them. And then we break into small groups anyway. So we're trying to go from big rooms and then to break it down into smaller digital rooms to where they can connect. And then the normal leaders that they're used to connecting with week in and week out are there hosting a room of 10. And again, Zoom actually facilitates that. Some of you guys might be familiar. You might have covered that at the beginning here, but Zoom, you can start on a big call and then you can break it in by rooms, and that can be done based on who your leaders are. So just taking time to meet with your key leaders who already help in youth ministry. If you guys do small group flow, however that breaks down for you, that's kind of what we're leaning into. Very similar to what we just talked about with church kids, who are the people and the faces they're used to seeing, and then finding ways digitally to help make that happen and facilitate that.
Yeah, tonight we're actually substituting what would have been a big public gathering with a big IG live party. And we're just trying to, as Pastor Ryan said, leverage technology on a platform that they're already on to try to see how it works. Now, the truth is, we've never done it, so we're going to see how it goes. But that's the position that we're all faced with right now. Churches that have never streamed before are now streaming. Churches that have never really engaged on social media are now engaging on social media, just based on the nature of where we're at. I have a friend who pastors a small church in our hometown, and they couldn't meet. And so he literally set up his iPhone on a little $9 Gorilla Pod holder, and Facebook streamed his message and worship to his church, and they loved it. I watched it last night. He texted me and said, I know it's not what you guys do, but what are your thoughts? And I told him how awesome it was to see, 65-year-old grandma chatting in on Facebook to say, I need some help getting food. And then someone else responded right away and saying, we're on our way to your house as soon as service is over. That's the church mobilized in the midst of crisis, bringing hope to the world. And to me, that's exciting. And that's what this is all about. So going back to our original premise, it doesn't have to be as daunting as it seems.
Yep.
We all see the big church, and we all see all the big, like Pastor Josh said, the moving cranes and the big cameras. And we think that online has to look like that. Really what it looks like is being the church, just in a new way.
Yeah.
And that's been the most exciting thing for me to see.
Yeah. And can I just add to that, Dono? I think, the word we're trying to come back to, and it's just engagement. And engagement doesn't have to be highly produced, right? So I think all of us know how we naturally engage with people in our everyday life. And Crystal, I don't know if we addressed your question you asked earlier, and you were talking about, that essentially you're wanting to adjust better to the online, but currently you've seen lower engagement online, and you're more or less asking, how do we engage better online? And I think the engagement factor, like for your instance, do you text with your leaders and people? I would start with like the most basic places, like, oh yeah, I text groups of people all the time, or maybe you guys are email, or both. And or maybe you're connecting on, Instagram message. I don't know, whatever it is that you naturally connect with people. I would say start there, communicate. And then if there's a platform that you're wanting to engage on, maybe you're like, yeah, we're going to try the Zoom thing, or we're going to try we're going to try a FaceTime call. We're going to try some other platform you figured out. Use those modes of communication I think all of us are on. I think we're all texting, and that would be a really great way to engage people, to invite them and make it really personal. And like, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's how you can help with us. We're going to all jump together and get the core. It's very grassroots, get the core going. And from there, I think you can build, substantial engagement if you'll just allow yourself and some of your team to really interact and engage people, starting with something as simple as text that you don't have to spend a lot of money on. You don't have to have a big budget just to go grassroots, and then use some of these free platforms and what they're offering.
Exactly. And I think, one of the other questions that came in is that how would we recommend navigating small group ministry, which I think goes right alongside with what Pastor Ryan just shared. The truth is that if you look back even in New Testament church, they met in house to house, home to home, and they broke bread. And right now, 10 or under is the current suggested plan, and whatever that looks like for you. But I think small groups are a great opportunity right now on free sources like this. Zoom offers free accounts that can hold small groups of people that you could still get together, or as Pastor Ryan said, chatting and texting, whatever that looks like. And so,
and Zoom has a thing. If you want to expand your room, I mean, there is a cost. I think they're $15 a month.
Yep.
Which, maybe you don't have, but in the light of what we're dealing with, $15 a month for a couple of months, I don't think is going to break anyone's budget, right? Which would allow us to get into bigger groups and to have a little bit more control over the kind of gatherings. So it's just one. There are other options other than Zoom out there.
For sure. Google just announced yesterday that they're offering their version of it for free through July, just because their premium version of it for free through July, just to help people stay engaged and connect. And so I think there's a lot of ways that we can still find engagement and make it good at the same time. So that's a great question. There's some great comments coming in as we talked about kids. The Life Church kids curriculum is free, and so there's no licensing required for that. One of the big questions that came in, speaking of live streaming again, we have a lot of churches that want to stream live to Facebook or YouTube, but because of copyright issues, feel like they can't stream worship. Is there only alternative to use a streaming service? Is copyright an issue on all platforms? Jared, let me kick it to you.
Yes. So we stream our full worship set to Facebook every week. So the only thing that you cannot do is say you take a Hillsong or an Elevation, just straight up track and play it through Facebook. Yeah, they'll kick you off. You cannot just play like somebody else's worship. If you're doing it live, you can do pretty much anything you want to. The only thing that Facebook requires, as soon as you're done with your live broadcast, you have to pull it off, which is not that big of a deal because you're done anyway. If you don't pull it off, they will pull it off for you. But I will say, even just a basic stream, because some people are like, I don't even have the ability to stream live worship at all. We don't have cameras. We don't have gear. We don't have anything. Me and a couple of guys have got together and we own a small company that helps churches, resource churches with this kind of gear. And if you want to reach out to me, I'll put my email on there. We have found an affordable, it's like a camera package that you can get that streams directly to Facebook or YouTube. You're not going to be, like Elevation quality. I'm not saying you're like, you've made it for, $400 or $500, but this will get you online. And like I said, it's full HD. So it is better quality than just your phone or something like that. And it has the ability to hook in microphones straight to the camera. So you get a little bit better audio quality. But yeah, with streaming, there is no license problem as long as you're not just playing a direct source. Just go through Spotify and play music. Yeah, that won't work online.
Exactly what Jared said. At the end of the day, YouTube, if you stream worship to YouTube, which we do every week, and every week we get a little thing that says there's a copyright flag. It doesn't mean that you're flagged. It doesn't mean that you're kicked off. All it says when you really look at it is that you can't monetize that video, which we're not trying to do anyways. So it's not a problem. And like Jared said with Facebook, as long as you remove the replay of the live broadcast afterwards, it's not a problem. And what they'll do if you forget to is they'll mute the audio of that portion of your video. And so if there's any backing track or anything that you use, it will just mute that portion of video. So Hillsong song, all of a sudden you're watching them and their mouth's moving, but you're not hearing much of anything. And then as soon as that song is over, you go right back to hearing audio again. But at the end of the day, just as Jared said, the goal is pull it back down afterwards, and then you're all good with that. So yeah, so keep the question is multi-tracks. That's exactly the answer to that question. You can still use multi-tracks. Just know that we have a CCLI license to play songs. If you're using CCLI, which you should be as a church, you have a license in your auditoriums, and there's another streaming license that you can use for streaming online. And the only issue with multi-tracks is that it can flag you in Facebook and YouTube because it is from the actual band that you played. Let's see here. Got a lot of people asking questions about getting those links. We'll provide those in the chat window or immediately after this. So another great question is, how are you prioritizing online greeting or experiences for guests? If so, what does that look like? Josh, you guys did something really cool this week. Why don't you share that?
Yeah, it was part of our just the capture that we had in a separate room. And this is maybe a little bit off the question, but I'll get back to it. But maybe for people who are thinking, you're getting hung up on the word streaming, like live. We did a capture on Saturday and then went live on Sunday, but it was all pre-done and fixed, and they made it look pretty. So if you're thinking like, man, how could we stream? We didn't stream either. And let you behind the curtain, a lot of your favorite places aren't live either. They're pre-recorded. So, but as far as our greeting went, we kind of, we were really trying to strike the balance between welcoming everybody, again, remembering that other people were looking through the window into what we were doing. And so we welcomed all of them. We leaned into the fact that they were in their living rooms, made jokes about being in their pajamas, and, you know, you probably got pancakes in front of you and your coffee, like, how neat is this? And we really tried to, we didn't use language like can't be at church or because we're not together. We used the language church is in your living room. Like we purposely didn't say we're not having physical gatherings this weekend. We said our physical gatherings have moved to your living room. And we really tried to be intentional about that language so that they didn't feel like they were missing out on something. It felt like a step forward, and it felt like something exciting and something new rather than like, oh my gosh, coronavirus, we can't have church. It was like, look at this cool thing that we all get to do together. And I loved seeing how many churches used that kind of language in their greeting. It's cool to see how the Holy Spirit moves in planning meetings all across the country when none of us really talk to each other. But I saw so much of that similar language. And so we treated our greeting far different than as if everybody was in the auditorium together. We just acknowledged what it was, and we welcomed them. We had a few people in the room, some of our leadership collective students. I think we had like 20 people in the room when we could still have more than 10 together. So we had like 20 people in the room for the capture in a smaller room. We told them what was going on. Here's who's in the room. Here's why we're doing this. We're trying to build this atmosphere of faith and expectation. And so then before I preached, our host just encouraged everyone, because we have a high feedback culture for preaching. We call it the preach back. And so just encouraged them, hey, preach back in your living room. Like, preaching is a team sport. So go for it. If you're on YouTube, preach back in the comment section. Our comment section was wild on our stream. It was like being there on a Sunday morning. And then since our staff, even paid and volunteer staff, they didn't have assignments that Sunday morning, that was their assignment. You're in the comment section. You're engaging. You're like welcoming people. We were like digital greeters, like, hey, super glad you're here. Where are you checking in from? And so it created a lot of cool, it wasn't just the pre-recorded greeting that we had live. We also had live greeters in our YouTube comment section, which created this really cool like excitement and buzz. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's why I asked you that question. I watched, and it was great, and I loved every bit of it. We currently do greetings and all that stuff for our online audience. This week, I'm going to have Pastor Ryan talk about this because we filmed together this week about this. But we also we wanted to address the other issues. So we currently have an online audience, but we now also have physical audience that is now joining us online. So Pastor Ryan, what would you say to how kind of we did?
Yeah, I mean, we did. We addressed, very similar ways that you did, Josh. And I think because in our scenario, and depending on how it looks at your churches, in our scenario, we do have a weekly online team and online broadcast. And there is a, quote unquote, regular group of people who don't live close enough to a physical campus who are regulars at Church Online. And so for us, we were really intentional to make sure we addressed all of our physical locations by name and just welcomed them. We did that as we were engaging for, a variety of things. Prayer, if you have prayer needs, things, we miss, just saying things like we miss you, I want to shout you out. And I know when we watched it later, I was my wife and I hosted a watch party at our house. And as we were on that call digitally and it's coming through the screen and we're naming out the cities, when they got to our city that we're in, like our whole room erupted and started screaming just like we do at our locations each week. And so even if that's, I know that this context would be if you have multiple locations, but even finding ways just to shout out the room in this, whatever is meaningful and specific. Like I love, Josh, that you use language that you use on a weekend, like we do the preach back, whatever your verbiage is, people guarantee people are on the other end resonating, even if they're in their living room and going to shout back at you and have fun with it. So I think that also helps to normalize it too. But for us specifically, it's also just recognizing that and letting our online family know, hey, we have a bunch of new family that's online that's regularly at a campus, and right now they're in their living room with the rest of us.
Exactly. And I think it leans well to this other question that's came in is how do we communicate well on behalf of our pastors, and how do we make online platforms, social media, all that stuff engageable and effective for people, even if there's not a large team? I know we talked about the large team part earlier, but how do we communicate well on behalf of our pastors? Pastor Ryan, why don't you tackle that?
Sure. I think this is just a culture thing. This is culture beyond online. I think, just it should be, because if you are fortunate enough, like a lot of us here, to be on a full-time staff and in a role, or even if you're a volunteer leader for that fact. For many years in my life in church, in fact, up to this date, I spent more years as a volunteer leader than I have as like a full-time church staff member. And I think one of the best, in any of those seats we sit in, it really is a privilege to be leading for Jesus and his church, and quite honestly, on behalf of our pastors. And so when you come on a team, we're actually here to represent our pastors and leaders. And so part of our language and the culture that we've created and we work really hard for is we continue to, no matter what setting, if my wife and I lead a small group, if we're talking about growth track on the weekend, I'm always finding ways to loop in the vision of our lead pastors. I call them by name. So I even think, you don't have to say it every sentence, but sometimes just in your language on behalf of pastor, so-and-so, whoever your lead pastor is, make sure you find ways to say, hey, just want to let you know, we see you, Pastor so-and-so and so-and-so, love you. We're praying for you. We're thinking about you. And find as many creative ways and in a very natural sense to include verbiage. Even when you're sending text message to team members, we're helping stretch the arms of our leaders and represent our team. So just taking that same thing we would do in a weekend context or any other meeting we would be in or any other engagement interaction we would be in, and just bringing that same language into your chat online or into your verbiage that you're using if you happen to be someone who's in front of the camera.
Exactly. Josh, Pastor Josh, you're lead pastor. So, you mentioned earlier not having a large team, but having volunteer army that is ready to go. What would you say to that from the heart of the lead pastor that you would hope that your team could do to help benefit you in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot like Pastor Ryan was just saying. It's a culture thing that goes beyond just being online, like a high culture of elevating one another and honoring each other. And Ryan is great, on behalf of our pastors. Like there's a measure of trust. If they're letting you speak on that, there's a measure of trust that they have with you. And so to be pointing that back, to being able to, like, the value that adds to me is when we have someone on team or on the camera with the microphone on that, lending credibility. Like, I'm obviously lending them my credibility by, we have that logo, our church logo sitting down there, that we're lending them credibility, but they're also multiplying me and my wife's voice without making us say it. And so it adds so much value in making people in the church see that there's space for them, that, hey, gosh, if that person can do it, like, hey, maybe I could do it too. Not everything is coming from the pastor. And so it creates this great, unified voice, I guess is the language that I'm trying to find, a unified voice that is really comforting to people in this season. So I would say specifically in COVID season is what we're calling it. Whether that's good or not to call it, that's what we're calling it. During COVID season, for them to see that unity, that the team is not freaked out, that, hey, on behalf of our pastors, we're glad you're here. We pray that you're staying safe, that your team is healthy, your family is healthy, and we're speaking words of faith. It's really comforting, I think, for people. That's a value that from my chair, that's the value that it would add to me and to our church.
And can I say this too, just to add on to the culture conversation? Our team is really big. Those of you that have interacted with Champion Center or Team Church, you probably know this and you've heard us talk about this before, but we really believe in it, like, all the way down. It goes very deep into our team. And unfortunately in the church space, and maybe, through the years of your maturing process and coming into leadership, you've even been guilty of saying these words. So what I'm saying is not to make anyone feel bad. We've all had missteps. We're all young and immature when we first start, but through time we learn maturity. We're going through leadership, and when you get around great leaders, you realize, like, even principles that the early disciples learned. And when they talked about, Paul, and we're all pointing people to Jesus. So we all realize that at the end of the day, our lead pastors, they're pointing people to heaven, to Jesus. And that's what all of us are doing collectively. Having said that, the most natural thing that humans do when they first start following Jesus is they follow people. And follow me as I follow Christ. And so we're helping leverage the credibility that our lead pastors have built up in their community for years. In our case, we have a pastor that's been pastoring 34 years. Well, that comes with a lot of credibility, right? And so even if you're just starting and you're a newer pastor, you already have certain levels of credibility that you've built with your team, with people. And as you go on in time and you stay faithful in a community, that human credibility goes up. And all of us want to leverage our human credibility to point people to Christ. And so if you realize through the lens of unity, which the early church leaders called us all to, we've got to unify consistently, regularly. And when there's this unified front, that I'm going to use everything that you might like about me as a human to ultimately point you to God. That's what we're all trying to do. But then think organizationally as the church, everything we can do to use the credibility of our church and our lead pastors to ultimately point people to Christ, and to realize I'm not just trying to build a me thing. Like, I'm not trying to just build a Ryan Cameron thing. I'm trying to build my local church. I love the vision of our church, and to fall in love with the house that God has put you in, the leaders that God has put over you, is a really incredible thing. And there's also power of unity and covering for all of us as Christ followers. So when that gear really shifts in your head, and again, I'm saying this is big picture culture, but this applies to everything we're talking about online. And I think it's always worth saying anytime we're in leadership settings, when we stay in that, and especially in this season when things are going crazy and people feel like you're pointing them to a bigger vision, which ultimately everything we're doing is pointing people to Christ. That's a really sweet spot for all of us to lean into, to stay in. And it's at the end of the day, more people are going to fall in love with God and get connected to the life of the church if we stay big like that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I love that is a part of, like, the Champion Center culture, the Team Church culture. and probably the majority of you that are tuning in right now, probably your culture as well. I think in times like this, that it's not hard to, it's easy to forget the weight that our lead pastors are carrying in the middle of this. There's a lot to think about that we may not be thinking about as second chair leaders or people who are serving in volunteer capacities, whether you're staff or not staff, paid or unpaid. There's a lot to be navigated through. In fact, it leads us to a really great question. Pastor Josh, you talked about pre-recording and going into that, and that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. It can potentially create really long nights. And so one of the questions is that has been asked is that this person asked, we did this too, but it resulted in an all-nighter for our staff. How can we make this more reproducible rather than streaming? And Pastor Josh, you said something that I love, that a lot of the people that you love and watch every week are doing this exact thing.
Yeah. There's I remember that being a huge like mind opener to me, that, oh gosh, maybe we could stream our services too, when I realized how much live stuff it's not a lie. It is a live event, like in the way that we call it. It's just, it's pre-done and pre-recorded, which there's reasons for that. You don't want pitchy people. Like, as much as possible, you're trying to fix stuff. You're trying to make it look good. Like, hey, you're not trying American Idol. That's a no for me, dog. And like, move on. Because whether it's right or wrong, if I'm watching stuff online and it's hard to listen to, I turn it off. Like, I don't have the emotional capacity to sit through pitchy worship. I'll tell you, my where the space I'm at as a lead pastor, I have to go into a different room and just pray. No, I'm kidding. Our team is really good. But there's a lot to be said for that. And so one of the things that we are doing and we have the ability to do in this season, because a lot of our weekly responsibilities have gone by the wayside, so we're shifting, is that we've moved our capture back. I think we're doing it on Thursday, which what it does is it makes my job a little harder, because I only have 4 days to finish content. And so I'm the kind of guy who usually gets the notes to the team. I take as many of the 6 days as I possibly can. And so it's ramping up my process, but that will give, because our production team on that side is completely volunteer. There's not 1 cent paid to those people. So they have full-time jobs and families, those people who are doing the production side of that. And so to move it back to Thursday for us in this season is I'm doing what I can to elevate the team and equip them and help them, give them the longest on-ramp that they can, because their families are freaked out too. Are we going to have jobs next week? Are we going to be on quarantine? And so as much as I can do within reason to serve them well, because it is a big process. Sorry. I had a call with one of our guys earlier, and he was like, I'm just wondering if you know all of everything that goes into it. And when we're asking to do it here, I just want you to be aware. So I was like, hey, I do know kind of all of that goes into it, and that's why you have a job. And I'm glad that you said that. But I'm going to do what I can in this season to help our teams. And so that's some of the things that we've done, because it is a lot of work. We felt like for us, it was far less work than trying to figure out how to actually live stream something. We do not have the capacity or the bandwidth for that. So this was the best solution. But it did create extra work for our teams. And I think they got the video done by like 12:30 a.m. on Sunday. And so it was just a lot of work, but it's COVID season. There's things that we're not aware of, and we're just going to have to know, like, one of the values at our church is inconvenience is our way of life. And so we just lean into that, and that was super inconvenient, but guess what? Jesus was inconvenienced to the point of dying on a cross. And so I'm going to do what I can to elevate our church by doing that stuff. So it's a lot of kind of word vomit for you, but that would be my answer to that question.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we kind of did the same thing. It appeared live, but it was all pre-recorded. Something, if you have, that will cut down hours of time, is if you already have some archived messages, If you've had that capability to record some of your messages, we did this. We had our pastor go back and say, okay, what's relevant to right now? Because, I mean, there's been other sermons that have to do with crisis and fear and all that kind of stuff. So we pulled out some of our archived messages and chopped those off and just filmed like an intro, did worship, a pre-sermon like intro, setting up the sermon, do the sermon, and then came back and filmed just a bumper of salvation. And that's how we got some of the engaging. I know somebody asked the question about, people coming to Christ and that sort of thing. We have a text in number that you can please text in if you accepted Christ today, this and that. And so it's a digital like card, basically. That's the first thing. If you have that capability, that'll cut hours out of editing because it's already, the sermon's pretty much done. You just kind of have to find a cut in and cut out point. And then with worship, that's always the biggest. I think worship is harder than the sermon. Not that the preparation is harder, but making it sound good online is always the like, oh my gosh, how are we going to make worship sound good? So what we did and what we're doing is we brought in a small scale team. You don't have to have crazy amounts of equipment. If you have an audio interface, you can pretty much record your whole team. And we just plugged them in. We had like 5 or 6 people here, and we recorded 10 songs. So that sounds like, oh my gosh, 10 songs. But you have a repetition of at least 10 songs that you do in your church normally anyway. So just pick, your top 10 of what you've been doing recently. We pre-recorded all 10 songs and then started working them down, making them sound good, that sort of thing, as best of our ability. We're not professionals in any way. It's not super produced and sounds like amazing, but it sounds better than just the online pitchy, horrible, somebody turned that background singer on who's just supposed to be on stage for energy. That it avoids all that. And so by doing 10 songs, we've gauged everything. Okay, what do we need to do for the next 4 weeks? That was our starting point. Okay, 4 weeks. Let's get together 4 weeks worth of material. And then that gives you a bumper that as the weeks go on, okay, this thing's going to play out a little bit longer. Let's go back in. Let's, try to record a little bit more. Let's do a little bit different. So that's kind of the way we did it. And yes, it was upfront editing, but right now we have maybe a couple hours left of editing and we're good for 4 weeks. So
exactly. And I think at the end of the day, no matter how you do it, the goal is how do we continue to move forward as a church? How do we continue to help people find Jesus? And remembering that even in the middle of stress and chaos, we get to do this. Like of all of the people on the planet, God chose to use us to help people experience freedom in Jesus, life in Christ. And that's the whole goal, is to help people move life forward. And so I really want to say thank you to Pastor Ryan, Pastor Josh, Jared, everyone that's been a part of this whole thing. We're going to go ahead and get this thing wrapped up. We said we'd do it for about an hour. I want to remind you of the meetup schedule is available on teamchurchconference.com/events. Jared has mentioned and added his link in there that they're offering help at cost. Yellow Box has also created a package to help at cost as well. And then the Team Church and Open Network partnership that we have is really amazing. And there's a ton of great resources, and we're constantly adding. This call and other calls like it are going to be added to that right away, as well as some coronavirus update and response stuff. So stay tuned for future meetups coming up. I'd like to take a chance just to pray for us really quick as we get ready to close this thing. God, we thank you for allowing us to be a part of what you're doing on earth today. Help us to bring hope to people. Help us to move life forward for people. Help us to engage people right where they're at. Jesus, that you would be glorified, that people would come to know you in a real and powerful way. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. It's been great hanging out with you guys today. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later.